events and you talk about civic issues, it's in the context of the fact that we are living through the greatest revolution in communications in 500 years. Everything you do has to be framed as part of that context because it affects everything you talk about, okay? Here are two people who represent not one, but the two revolutions we've had in a half a millennium. So who's this over here? Anybody? Gutenberg. When I first started teaching in Stonybrook, people thought it was the Ayatollah Khomeini. This was a long time ago. Gutenberg, who in 1450 decides that he is going to exploit the growing market of the Catholic Church, and he is going to try to mass produce Bibles. He has no interest in creating a revolution when he has the movable type printing press, and so suddenly he makes it cheap and easy to print information. And he spawns a revolution. Ironically, he spawns the Protestant Reformation, which challenges the Catholic Church. He helps people spread ideas across the globe everywhere. He dies, by the way, broke and blind. Who is the person who represents the second great revolution that we have here? You recognize Zuckerberg, who starts his project by trying to pick up girls at Harvard, not having the faintest idea that he is going to spawn or help represent a second revolution. Only in this revolution, not only will it be easier and cheaper to spread information, but we all are now going to have the tools to do it. It's not going to be people who control printing presses anymore. We're all consumers, distributors, sharers, creators of information. Okay? I don't think he's going to die broke, by the way. Right? Together, they create this revolution, giving us giving you unprecedented information that can help you make decisions. And you go out and dialogue with people, you talk to them about issues, and theoretically, they have a wealth of knowledge at their fingertips. They should be smarter than any generation that ever lived. You think your generation is smarter than anybody else? Maybe, yes, no, you're not sure yet, right? At the same time, it's created unprecedented challenges for all of us to understand what's true and what's not. A majority of Americans in a recent poll said that they find it harder, not easier now, to decide what's true. Given all that information, it's not easy, it's hard. They are overwhelmed by challenges. Overwhelmed. Here are some of the things we're up against. Let me tell you a story. In 2016, during the election, there was a Facebook group in Texas called The Heart of Texas. Hundreds of thousands of Facebook users on this particular site. And they advocated for the secession of Texas, right? And they heard about an Islamic temple in Houston that was building a new facility, a new library, and they alerted all of their members, and they said, we need to stop the Islamization of Texas. It's outrageous, we can't have this. And they urged all of the people on their Facebook group to come to a rally in downtown Houston. Well, when that happened, another group on Facebook called Save Islamic Knowledge heard about this, and they alerted all of their Facebook users to this rally and said, we've got to come down to that rally on the other side and represent the other side. So tell me what, if you can, Heart of Texas and Save Islamic Knowledge have in common. What do they have in common?
They use Facebook to spread their ideas.
They use Facebook. What else do they have in common?
They're both Russian organizations?
That's absolutely correct. The Islamic group is not Islamic. The Texas group is not from Texas. They are both Facebook groups that were run by Russian organizations. There were 3,000 of these posts on gun control, abortion, and the subject you're going to talk about today, But let me, before I tell you that, both groups showed up and got into a confrontation. Hundreds of Americans showed up. Totally manipulated by information that was not real at all. And these are the kinds of other posts that were on Facebook. The point here by the Russian groups were not to take a position for or against any of these issues. It was to divide Americans and sow discord and get people at each other's throats, and it worked very effectively. And by the way, most Americans had no idea how to vet this and understand what was real and what wasn't real. We are really dealing in this context with three issues. It's not just fake news. We'll talk about fake news for a second. What's fake news? Fake news is part of a much bigger issue that you all face. One is an absolute flood of misinformation on the internet that circulates every day. That information is not necessarily spread by people who are malevolent or people who have an agenda. It's often spread by people who are well-meaning, who are ignorant, or just spread by people who want to reinforce their point of view, right? And so in the area of immigration, for instance, there's a lot of misinformation that continues to get circulated. The idea that most foreigners who overstay their welcome in the United States after their visa and try to stay here illegally are coming from Mexico, when the reality is, where do they come from? Where do they come from? Canada, okay? The idea that most migrants are males, well, it's about 50-50 now in terms of immigration of people who cross the border. The idea that Trump administration and Republican administrations deport a greater percentage of undocumented migrants, not true. Greatest proportion deported under Clinton and Obama. Lots of information spread to support people's point of view, inaccurate. So that's misinformation. Then there's disinformation. That's fake news. That's information that's absolutely fabricated on purpose to manipulate you for commercial reasons, political reasons, etc. And then we have something called malinformation, which is really information in which people get private information about individuals and then out them on the internet in order to punish them, okay? So we've got a real challenge here in dealing with all this. Challenge one, we're overwhelmed with information, right? We have so much. What do psychologists tell us happens to us when we have too much of anything? What happens to us? When you get too much, when you're overloaded, what happens? Anybody? We shut down. Too much, overwhelmed, can't deal with it, shut it down. At a time we have to be dynamically attentive to information and what's true and what isn't, we're shutting down. And we're outsourcing our critical judgment to algorithms and to our friends. We're saying, well, if Google puts it high up in that algorithm, I can trust it. If my friend in this group, in the next gen group, sends me something, I'm going to trust it and spread it to other people because I trust that person. Those are terrible mistakes that we're making. Speed versus accuracy, and this gets to journalism as well. I was a newspaper reporter and an editor for 35 years. Everybody's trying to get information out very quickly. It is going to amplify the mistakes that are made. The blurring of the lines. What's journalism? What's advertising? What's propaganda? What's entertainment? What's raw information? The lines are blurring in many ways. I'll show you examples so that it's harder and harder to tell. And finally, the last thing I'll mention is the idea that one of the most difficult problems that we all have, and you're going to confront, if you haven't confronted already when you go back to your schools, is that people have a hard time accepting information that challenges their assumptions and their beliefs. It's very difficult for them to do that, and we have to find ways to overcome it. So so how many of you are on Instagram? How many of you are on Facebook, by the way? Not very many. I mean, I'm on Facebook, but my 11 grandchildren are not because I'm on Facebook. So that's never going to work. But Instagram, I'm on Instagram because they're on Instagram. So here's something that moved on Instagram by Jaden Smith, who is an entertainer, Will Smith's son. He has 13 million followers. He's very upset about what's happening in the Amazon. This is a photo that shows those fires that were taking place earlier this year. He's alerting everybody, right? He's got 1.5 million likes. He sent it to everybody. The only problem is that picture was taken 30 years ago, when his father was in the Prince of Bel-Air, by the way. But he picks it up because it's given it to him, and he spreads it. He means well, right? Here's something a little bit more provocative. This is somebody named Virendra Jubal, who is in Toronto. What does this picture look like? What's in that picture? What do you see? Yeah.
I see a Quran, and then also he's wearing a vest.
He has a Quran and he's wearing a suicide vest. That picture was posted on the internet, and it was a cruel hoax. It was posted by some people in Canada who didn't like his views. He was a journalist who covered the gaming industry. And so this is the real photo that they took, and they photoshopped him holding up his laptop.
Oh, they did.
Now, when there is a bombing attack in Europe, a couple of months later, guess whose picture shows up on the front page of a Spanish newspaper as a suspect? Virendra Jubal.
Isn't he Sikh?
He may be Sikh, I don't know. I don't know. But he is listed as a suspect. He winds up in newspapers. Look how easy technology, by the way, can fool you. And there are ways to deal with this. Lots of ways if you're smart to understand it. Another example of a story about a bunch of migrants attacking women in Germany. You've got real photos, you've got real headlines. The only thing is that story is totally fake. It was fabricated. This happened to be a year after there was a real attack. This story was picked up by the largest newspaper in Germany, which later had to apologize for putting it in the paper because they made the mistake. And it's not just fake, fabricated news. How do you know what news, especially when you go out into the civic space, you can trust? Here is a news site called the Free Telegraph. Okay, it's a news site. It gets lots of people. It has real stories. If you look at it, I don't know if you can read those stories. Those are all real stories. If you can look at it, what do you think about those stories? Anything jump out at you? Well, they're all stories that are basically positive stories about Republicans. They're real stories, all about Republicans. So who runs this site? Anybody have any idea? Well, we didn't know anything about it. There was no about us until the Associated Press did an investigation and found out that it is actually supported by the Republican Governors Association. But you don't know it. And there are so many sites now that say news. The NFL has a news site. You think they cover concussions? No. Companies have sites that look like and masquerade as news sites. Everybody wants to be a news site, to be credible. And there are sites in which the truth is hiding from us, but it's in plain sight. How many of you are familiar with this site? Anybody? Go ahead. Tell us about it.
We had to do it in like middle school. We had to go on that site, and basically it's like all false stories, and there's one where it talks about how Martin Luther King, it like claimed that it directly quoted him, and he said that something along the lines of like he didn't need to be in the public eye and he was like sleeping with all these women, but I don't think any of that was true.
So, and everybody hear that? But here's the real part about that. This site is martinlutherking.org. So when I get to Stonybrook University, I say to our students, some of the best students in the country, we're going to do a little thing on Martin Luther King. Go look for some information. Where do they go first? Where do you go first? Google. When you go to Google, This site is one of the top 3 or 4 sites. And it's a .org. Oh my God, a .org. It must be. A .org must be true. And as this young woman said, who runs this site? Who runs this site? Anybody have an idea? How about Stormfront, a white supremacist organization? Oh my God! How is that happening? You're shaking your head. It's right there. If you took the time to scroll down before you made judgments, you would see that. By the way, what does .org mean? And what does .com mean? Wrong. It means nothing. You understand that I can be a .com, you can be a .org. 10,000 people a year pay to be a .com and .org. It means nothing. There are only a few URLs that are actually vetted. EDU is vetted. GOV for a government site is vetted. So when you get something from whitehouse.com or whitehouse.org, and there are such sites like that, you know right away there's something wrong. Okay?